when it starts. Welcome to this edition of the Iowa blog. This is a continuation, part 7, of the criminal enterprise that was led by Mohammad that was on display during what was called the Battle of Badr. This here is my favorite Wookiee, and he is in charge of guard duty, responsibilities. So if you're a Muslim out there and you think it's appropriate to be my, I don't know if it's the 3,000th or 4,000th death threat, you would have to get past the great and powerful Wookiee. Now, that said, we're actually talking about stuff that's serious. The terrorist raid that Mohammad led against his own family at Badr has to rate as the worst beginning of a religion ever. And make no mistake, this is the beginning of Islam. Without this raid, Islam ceases to exist. And with this raid, Islam was enriched and empowered and was capable of then perpetrating more attacks similar to this. And they were equipped with the weapons of war. Although they didn't deploy them as weapons of war, they never faced ever. Muhammad never encountered an army. He always attacked civilians. But they would have enough weapons to press the case of Islamic terrorist raids against civilians. So Badr is exceedingly important as we try to understand the birth of Islam. Now, the sources I'm going to cite from are Ibn Ishaq's Sirah, which is the life of Muhammad, the life of Allah's messenger, to be precise. It is the first attempt to compile hadith, which are all reports from Muhammad and his companions. And it was put together in chronological order to present Muhammad's deeds and his words. There's no more important document really in Islam. While Muslims will of course deny it, it is actually more important than the Quran. It's better written than the Quran, and it gives the Quran context and chronology that it would otherwise lack. And without that context and chronology, the Quran is just a bunch of rubbish that cannot be followed, cannot be implemented. And there is no Muhammad. There is no example for Muslims to follow. There's no explanation of what happened back at this time. I will also cite from the Tarek. It was compiled by Tabari. It has considerable value to us. It's the second really most important document in Islam because Tabari was Islam's first historian. He's the first to actually collect the hadith collections to put them into a complete history of Islam's past, present, around Muhammad, and then even into its future. And the reason that his compilation is so important is that he was much broader in his collection of hadith than was Ishaq, but he also preserves so many of Ishaq's collection because Ishaq's collection has actually been lost. We have what Ishaq revealed through Hisham's redaction of it and through what is found in Tabari and later in Bukhari. But Bukhari is topical, not chronological. So Tabari goes back to before Muhammad, and he makes it very clear that every important aspect of Islam was established long before Muhammad. It was the pagan religion of those who were the custodians of the Kaaba, which by all accounts had to be in Petra because Mecca didn't exist at the time. And the descriptions of Petra fit both the Quran and the Hadith. So Bukhari goes way before Muhammad's birth and life, and takes us through the underpinnings of Islam, which happened with the very people that Muhammad was now attacking and killing and robbing and enslaving at Badr. They were the custodians of the Kaaba. They were the originators of the religion of Islam. One of the reasons Muhammad had to subdue them was because he was claiming their religion for his own. And Tabari is also interesting because he was the first to write a commentary on the Quran. And so his insights as the first Muslim to do so are profoundly important. I will also cite Bukhari. Bukhari is the most beloved topical arrangement of these hadith. And you should know that the hadith were spoken by exactly the same cast of characters that brought the Quran into existence. Most hadith either were spoken by Muhammad, or spoken about Muhammad, or spoken by those who were accompanying Muhammad. And they were preserved exactly the same way. The Quran went some 4 to 6 generations before being written down, where it was orally maintained, just like these hadith, by exactly the same cast of characters. The Quran can have no more credibility than the hadith, and the hadith no more credibility than the Quran. They are together, and one without the other renders the religion of Islam moot. And collectively, they are the entire essence of the religion of Islam. There is nothing more to Islam than the Quran and hadith. They comprise all that can be known about Muhammad and Allah. And I only use Islam's 5 oldest sources in making this presentation. I think it's also important for you to know that when I'm citing the from Ibn Ishaq's Sirah, that I'm using the most respected of all translations of it. I may even be the only translation of it. It was comprised by Alfred Goulim in the 1950s, and it is published by Oxford University Press. Very hard to get a copy of it, actually, because of the fact that when it's in libraries, Muslims check it out and destroy it because it is so indicting of their religion. The better one knows Muhammad, the less likely they are to be a Muslim. Pretty profound statement there, but it's true. In Tabari's work, there were many translators. The work was done in the 1990s and early 2000s, and the entire series was published by SUNY, which is the state of New York University Press. So New York State University Press. That then when we dealt with Bukhari, the nomenclature that I'm using is the original nomenclature, it's updated nomenclature, because the original Prophet of Doom was using the first published version by the Fad Foundation, by Khan was the lead translator. Khan is also the lead translator of the Noble Quran, which is the most popular Quran in existence today. Most of my Quran presentations in Goddamn Religion use the Noble Quran's word for word interlinear to be as exacting as is possible. Although I reference some 66 different English translations of the Quran to be as comprehensive and clear as can be, because there's many passages that no one has any clue what the words actually say. And I think at that point it's appropriate to give many different variations so that the reader and the listener has the opportunity to choose among them. So the nomenclature that I use now to designate the Bukhari Hadith was first compiled by MSA, USC's MSA, that's my alma mater, University of Southern California. Their Muslim Student Association decided they would attack Prophet of Doom by changing the nomenclature to make it look like that I was not citing the correct Hadith. And so, since they were so effective at getting this collection of Bukhari online worldwide. Now I'm simply changed to their nomenclature, same translation, uh, and problem solved. It's easy for you to look it up and verify what I'm saying is true. Also, while I'm giving this report orally, and you don't have the text to look at, obviously, uh, the 5 volume series, 4,200 pages of analysis that I present in Goddamn Religion is copiously documented. There is not a single citation in any one of the 4,200 pages that isn't properly cited, that will take you to the original source, and is therefore documented. So if you want to follow along, particularly as we move from volume 3, 4, and into 5, you will find all the documentation of everything that I'm citing here. So to rejoin our commentary as Wookie decides to nap, I don't know if you can still see him, but he is performing full function guard duty for me at this moment. Badar was a raid that failed from a pirate point of view. The criminal enterprise that Muhammad admitted in numerous hadith, and it's also confirmed in the Quran, that he attacked for no other reason than he wanted to rob his own extended family's civilian enterprise in this caravan. And that was his entire motive. And Allah admits that his entire motive was for blood. He wanted to kill the custodians of the Kaaba. And you might say, well, why would Allah want to kill the custodians of the Kaaba, since he's supposed to be the top dog of the Kaaba, and now he is considered, with his black rock, the sole god of the Kaaba? Because at the time, Allah was essentially a rocca non grata in the Kaaba. He wouldn't have been in the top 100 of the 365 more prominent rocks in the Kaaba. The big honkers in the Kaaba were Manat, Alat, and Al Uzza, followed by Hadrat and many others. So there just was no Allah there. And since Muhammad wanted his new God to be Allah after he moved from Kaabaville, where it had been, his God had been Rabbi, the Lord, which is a fast one that the rabbis pulled off on Muhammad, and also our Rahman, who was the deity of the Hanif poets that Muhammad plagiarized. He didn't move to Allah, and it actually wasn't Allah, as I've shared previously, was Allahi, Allahu, Allah, which is Hebrew for thee for him, two for him, the two for her is what the name that actually appears, the title, if you will, since it's prefaced by the definite article in the Quran. So there we are. So this Badar raid failed from a pirate point of view. The caravan that Muhammad and the first Muslims sought to plunder got away. Yet the ensuing skirmish ensured that the militants and the Meccans would have died for a rather extraordinary result. And that is that the religion of Islam was on its last gasp at this point. And it was literally resurrected out of the blood that flowed from Badar and from the money that was derived from Badar by not only the looting that was done there, but also and mostly by the captives that were kidnapped and ransomed, was why this became so important for Islam. And ultimately, the dying doctrine reshaped the world, because in the next 100 years from this point forward, Muslims would rape, pillage, plunder, enslave, and kill 1/3 of the Earth's population. Somewhere around 200 to 300 million souls. So, the Islamic lore that emerged this spring morning in 623 CE from the blood soaked sands near the sea serves as the only credible report for what happened at Badr and what gave birth to the Islamic religion. So, I would like to continue to share some of the most revealing lines spoken about the terrorist raid. And in this regard, you notice this is the seventh program, and we haven't even begun to review what the Quran had to say about Badr, although we were uh, in depth into the 33rd surah because of something that was attributed to it by one of the Badr raiders. But it's the 8th surah that was written entirely to validate that stealing and killing your own family and kin was a appropriate Islamic activity. In fact, the only acceptable Islamic activity. So I am also attempting to share everything that can be known from the Islamic Hadith regarding Badr. The reason that the one volume of Prophet of Doom became the 5 volumes of goddamn religion is I decided to leave nothing out. The entire Quran is presented. It's put in chronological order. It is explained, and it is set into the context of Muhammad's life using every pertinent hadith that can be known about what happened at this time. So the first poem that we will now consider, showing that I'm not alone in authoring a condemnation of Islam or calling Islam Muhammad's criminal enterprise. It is Ishaq 3:15, which I shared with you at the close of our 6th episode. It reads, "It was so criminal. Men could hardly imagine it. Muhammad was emboldened because of the bloody fighting. I swear, we shall never lack for soldiers." In the Arabic, it's mujahid, which are jihadists, nor jihadi leaders, driving before us infidels until we subdue them with a halter above their noses and with a branding iron. We shall drive them to the ends of the earth. We shall pursue them on horse and foot. We will never deviate from fighting in our cause. We will bring upon the infidels the fate of the Ad and the Jurhum. The Ad and the Jurhum were mythological communities. It's lose-lose for Islam either way. If they actually existed and Allah did to them what he said, which was he perpetrated terrorism and genocide, he claims to have destroyed some 5 or 6 different communities throughout the Quran. Most of what he claims is so repetitive, but nonetheless, he claims that for reasons that were trivial, he claims that he found and destroyed large communities. Now, the fact is that none of those communities have ever been found. So it's likely that Allah was lying about being a genocidal terrorist, which may be even worse than being a genocidal terrorist. But that's what these references mean. So any people that disobey Muhammad will pay for it. And that's the reality of Islam. To be a Muslim, one must obey Muhammad. The only way one can obey Muhammad, since the Quran claims to be Allah's words, is for you to know what the Hadith says Muhammad claimed. And Muhammad's words are only found in the Hadith. So if you do not surrender to Islam, then you will live to regret it. You will be shamed in hell and forced to wear a garment of molten pitch forever. It's a little known fact, but it is nonetheless verifiable and true that of the several hundred times that Allah is depicted in the Quran, he is only shown in hell. Allah spends all of his time in hell terrorizing sadistically those he doesn't like. And that would be the preponderance of humankind, including all peaceful Muslims and all non Muslims, are being, and even a Muslim who took his own life because of the pain and anguish of having fought in Allah's cause and realizing that there was no hope for survival. Uh, you see, you have to die killing non Muslims or peaceful Muslims for Allah to have any chance of avoiding Allah's hell. Well, second only to the Quran, this may be the nastiest, most intolerant, violent, and sadistic poem ever written. It is a world-class Suratan. Now, fulfilling a prophecy, a Muslim speaking of the sons of Ishmael said, "In peace you are wild asses, rough and coarse, and in war you are like women wearing corsets. But I care not so long as my hand can grasp my thrusty blade." Now, this was likely being projected at his own extended family, the Quraysh, whom they were there to kill and plunder. And the wild ass reference, of course, takes us back to Barashith, where speaking of Ishmael's descendants, and Muslims claim they are descendants of Ishmael, Yahweh said that of Ishmael's descendants, his brother's hand will be raised against his brother and his hand against him, and that they will live in hostility to the whole world. And he begins by saying that indeed, Ishmael's descendants, today's Muslims, will be wild asses of men. So you will be wild asses of men. Your brother's hand will be raised against you, your hand against your brother's, and you will live in hostility with the entire world, is what Yahweh spoke accurately about Islam. This would have been just prior to or around 2000 BCE, and Islam would not exist for 26 and a half centuries. Eshach 3:10. As soon as we were confronted by the raiding party, we turned our backs and they started killing and capturing us at their pleasure. This is also being attributed to one of the extended family members that were there as part of the caravan party. So as soon as we were confronted by the raiding party, you'll notice they were terrorists, the Muslims were, we turned our backs. They didn't want to fight them, but they started killing and capturing us at their pleasure, enjoying killing and capturing. Some of our men turned tail, humiliated. Allah smote some of us with pustules from which we died. Well, that didn't occur, but nonetheless, it assuages the Muslim soul to claim that Allah was in on the murderous spree. Eshach 3:11. When the Quraysh began to bewail their dead, the Quraysh would be the custodians of the Kaaba, the inventors of the religion of Islam, and the those who knew Muhammad best, and therefore they are the subject of the single most repetitive rant in the Quran, with more than 500 iterations. I call it the never-ending argument. Those who knew Muhammad best, better than anybody today, called him demon-possessed, a charlatan, a complete fraud, a man who was making up the Quran by stealing the religious lore of other people and twisting it to serve his agenda. That's what they said. That's what's recorded in the Quran. So when the Quraysh began to bewail their dead, consumed in sorrow, one said, "Do not do this, for Muhammad and his companions will rejoice over our misery." This is the birth of Islam. Eshach, page 340. Surely Badr was one of the world's great wonders. The roads to death are plain to see. Disobedience causes a people to perish. In Islam, you either obey and surrender or you die. It is as much an enemy to liberty and freedom as Islam is to life. Disobedience causes a people to perish. They become death's pawns. We had sought their caravan, nothing else. But they came to us and there was no way out. So we thrust our shafts and we swung our swords, severing their heads. Our swords glittered as they killed. The banner of error was held by Satan. He betrayed the evil ones, those prone to treachery. He led them to death, crying, "Fear Allah, He is invincible." They attribute that line, by the way, to Satan. Because, well, Allah is Satan. Satan knew what they could not see. Yes, that he was Allah. On that day, 1,000 spirits were mustered, and they were excited on white stallions. Allah's army, demons, fought with us. Under our banner, Gabriel attacked, and he killed them. End quote. I'm going to share some insights from this again because this is Islam. Islam is nothing more than this. This is the birth of the religion that became the plague of death. Muhammad orchestrated this raid to rob his extended family's caravan, and he perpetuated the raid to kill and abduct as many Quraysh, of which he was a member of that community, as was possible. So surely Badr was one of the world's great wonders. Yet it is a wonder that a religion of 2 billion people grew from this crude, deadly, bloody, savage, immoral, thieving beginning, where even Satan is on Allah's side. Surely Badr was one of the world's great wonders. The roads to death are plain to see. Yes, the road to death, plain to see in Islam. A river of blood flows directly from under Muhammad's feet. Disobedience causes a people to perish. It is submit or die. They became death's pawns. We had sought their caravan, nothing else. They were there only to steal. But they came to us. No, they didn't come to you. You came to them. And there was no way out. So we thrust our shafts and we swung our swords and we severed their heads. For what reason? So that our swords glittered as they killed? This, ladies and gentlemen, is Islam. There is no other Islam. These were Muhammad's companions doing exactly what Muhammad ordered them to do and what Allah glorified. The banner of error was held by Satan. He betrayed the evil ones. Satan betrayed those the Muslims were killing. He betrayed the evil ones, those prone to treachery. He led them to their death. But Allah claims that he was the cause of their death. We've read hadith that claim that, so that does make Allah Satan. Thank you very much for making my case. He led them to their death. Satan did, crying, "Fear Allah, he is invincible." Now, if that doesn't make Satan Allah, you're not thinking. I mean, it's as clear as words allow. Satan said, "Fear Allah, he is invincible." Satan knew what they could not see. Indeed, he did. That Allah is Satan. On that day, 1,000 spirits were mustered. Now, if it took 1,000 demons to kill a score of overweight, intoxicated, distracted merchants, then Allah's demons are as impotent as is Allah. And so, if indeed there were demons there and they were involved in the killing, which is unlikely since they're spiritual beings and they can't ride horses and they don't swing swords, and the deaths were all caused by swords being swung, swords, cudgels, and spears being wielded by the first Muslims killing their own kin. But Islam loses either way. Allah's demons are totally and completely impotent, with 1,000 of them allegedly attacking a score of merchants, and even then only backing up the thrusting and killing and slaughtering that we have heard thus far among the Muslims, and their swords glittering with blood. Oh, but they were mustered on excited white stallions because, well, it's, what would you expect? How would they, these spiritual beings, get there if they weren't riding white stallions? Couldn't see the white stallions, of course. You couldn't see the spiritual beings, but nonetheless, Muhammad claimed they were there. And they fought with us. Yes, Allah's demons, Satan's demons, fought with us as Muslims. Under the banner, Gabriel attacked and killed them. Gabriel is one of the great mistakes that Muhammad made. He made many, but Gabriel is introduced to us in the book of Daniel. And in the book of Daniel, Daniel says on both meetings that Gabriel was a man, presented as a man, a human, as an ish. Gabriel itself means God's most capable and competent man. It is from Gabar, which means strong human. God's most capable and courageous man is Dode David. He was the prophet that actually spoke to Daniel and predicted when he would return to fulfill Pesach Matzah and Bakorim in 33 CE, providing the exact date. Dode is confused with and renamed David. It's Dode. He is the actual Messiah. He's the Son of God. He is the one who is returning, and he is the greatest defender of his people. Not only would he not attack and kill these Koresh, which he would have had no interest in, but he would never attack and kill somebody that wasn't attacking and killing Jews. And since these very Muslims, when they return to Yathrib, will begin attacking and killing Jews, Gabriel, God's most capable and competent man, will be the ultimate enemy who will eradicate all traces of Islam. So we must not allow Muslims to deceive the world and play the victim card, claiming Muhammad only took up arms to defend his people. Nothing could be further from the truth. These Muslims were the instigators. They were the attackers. They were the terrorists. They were the raiders. And they were only a defender once. And even in the battle, when they fought to protect their home, they were fighting to protect stolen goods that they had taken from the people who were trying to get them back. from their own kin who wanted to stop the onslaught of terrorist raids, from the very people who the Muslims mutilated on this day. And they wanted to hold the marauders accountable. And that was it. All the rest of the time, Muhammad and his raiders were either perpetrating armed robbery or genocide. Now, same is true, of course, with what happened on October 7th, 2023. Israel had done nothing to antagonize the Gazan Muslims. Gaza had been part of the Egypt, where it was called an outdoor prison, and the Muslims living there were part of Egypt. They were some 40,000 of them in 1948 that had been part of Egypt, and so Israel actually withdrew from Gaza. It had nothing to do with the Muslims there who were bred and indoctrinated to hate and want to perpetrate genocide against Jews and have attempted to do so. So Israel had done nothing to antagonize the Gazan Muslims. They were not occupying their land. In fact, they had enabled and enriched them. After all, the capital of the Fakistinians is in Swiss bank accounts. Even in Judea and Samaria, Jews lawfully and constructively build homes on barren land that they own and then tend their sheep, their farms, and their orchards. The IDF does not occupy the hellholes Muslims have built for themselves and only go in to remove those who have attacked Jews. They cannot wait to leave, and they do. And while the Muslim Fakistinians commit over 6,500 terrorist atrocities against Jews annually, there are only 120 settler reprisals, which is extraordinary restraint. While there was no sign of Gabriel on this day, I concur, Satan was there, and Muslims are murderers. And the confession is audacious. Satan betrayed the evil ones, those prone to treachery, and he led them to their death, crying, "Fear Allah, he is invincible." Satan knew what they could not see. The hallmarks of Islam, according to Allah, include the favors of humiliation, shame, captivity, and death. These are the very things that validate the religion. Ishaq 3:41. Have you seen how Allah favored his apostle and how he humiliated the unbelievers? They were put to shame in captivity and death. They weren't put to shame in a debate. Islam does not debate. They weren't put to shame because Allah revealed something that was inspiring and innovative and uplifting, because that never happened. Allah always shamed anyone who wouldn't submit to him and capitulate to him by having his goons kill them. They were put to shame in captivity and in death. Sounding like 10:7 again, isn't it? The apostles' victory was glorious. Yes, I remember in Gaza they celebrated the glory of rape and abduction, and torture, terrorism, mass murder. Its message is plain for all of us to see. The Lord, yes, it is. But why are so many blind to it? The Lord brought repeated calamities upon the pagans, bringing them under the apostles' power. Well, if that were true, if the Quraysh were pagans, then Islam is pagan, because the Quraysh invented Islam. Really, every aspect of Islam is based upon the religious traditions that the Quraysh orchestrated around the Kaaba 4 and 5 generations before Muhammad was born. Allah's angry army. He had no army, but he had mujahideen, jihadists, terrorists, a gang of goons. Allah's gang of goons, if I might be more correct, smote them with their thirsty swords. Yes, Islamic swords hunger for blood. Many a lusty youngster left the enemy lying prone. Yes, the youth of Islam are murderers. Their women wept with burning throats, for the dead were lying everywhere. But now they are in hell. You see, in Islam, it's a very unique religion in that, and most religions, murderers go to hell, and their victims have the opportunity to go to heaven. But in Islam, it's the murderers who go to heaven and the victims who go to hell. Now, most people would think that's immoral. I would think that's immoral, but not to a Muslim. That's why Islam is incompatible with humanity, with life, liberty, morality. It is really shameful, but nonetheless true, that abducting, taunting, and butchering begat a religion capable of corrupting 2 billion people. Thirsty swords smote youngsters while their mothers wept. This is the message of Islam, plain for all to see. So I must ask, why was Israel taken by surprise on October 7th, 23? Why has the world failed to make this connection between the barbarism and cruelty on display in these confessions from the very best Muslims who ever lived? There is a zero possibility that these Muslims have Islam wrong. There is no possibility whatsoever that these Muslims making these citations, following Muhammad's orders as he is overseeing this event, have corrupted their religion. None. And that makes this their religion. This, therefore, is the religion of Islam. Therefore, the terrorists have not corrupted their religion has corrupted them. Statement of fact. It's rationally irrefutable, evidentially proven. One of the Quraysh merchants, Al-Harith, was one of the few sane voices, Hadith Ishaq 342. I wonder at foolish men like these who sing frivolously and vainly of the slain at Badr. It was nothing more than an impious and odious crime. Men fought against their brothers, their fathers, their sons. Any with discernment and understanding recognized the wrong that was done here. By Islam's own scriptures, the first to collect the sayings of Muhammad and those who accompanied him as Islam was being conceived, said the following. And they preserved this confession. I wonder at the foolish men like these who sing frivolously and vainly of the slain at Badr. This was nothing more than an impious and odious crime. Men fought against their brothers, their fathers, and their sons, and with discernment and understanding, recognize the wrong that was done here. And was done in the first 100 years of the Islamic era, where 200 million people were raped, enslaved, plundered, and murdered. Their blood cries out for the world to wake up, to ban, to condemn, to isolate, to quarantine this horrid death cult. And there's a nice confirmation here that I keep on saying, that when Muhammad went to rob this caravan and Allah wanted Muhammad and his goons to kill those that were part of it, that they were their brothers, their fathers, and their sons. They were so corrupted by Islam that they sang about killing their fathers, their brothers, and their sons. So any with discernment and understanding recognize the wrong that was done here. Am I getting my point across? What more do you need? to understand that Islam is the grave curse, a deadly plague that has been unleashed on the world. Clearly, al-Harith was right. His words were rational, they were sobering. And he was a contemporary of Muhammad and the first Muslims. He was an eyewitness to their crimes. Cobb recited Ishaq 344. I wonder at Allah's deed. None can defeat him. Evil ever leads to death. Oh, does it ever? We unsheathed our swords and we testified to the unity of Allah, and we proved that his apostle brought truth. By the way, I want to remind you again, when they say that they were killing their fathers, their brothers, and their sons, they were killing the Quraysh. The Quraysh were the custodians of the Kaaba. They were the ones who invented the religion of Islam with its circumambulation of the Kaaba, with the Kaaba itself, with the two pilgrimages, the lesser and greater pilgrimage, the prostration prayer, all of it, every detail of Islam was created by these very people that Allah was demonstrating the truth of his religion by killing. It's astonishing, isn't it? We smote them, and they scattered. The impious met death. They became fuel for hell. Yes, those who were murdered on this day, robbed, plundered, abducted, and murdered, became the fuel for hell. And the reason he said that is because Allah actually claims that men's bodies are the faggots of hell's fire. Repetitively in the Quran. All who are not Muslims will go there. Well, fortunately, Muhammad and Allah were nothing but psychotic liars. And hell is actually for Muslims and their ilk. Allah will be a permanent inmate. Muhammad will be there too. It will consume them while the stoker, capital S, increases the heat. You know who the stoker is? Read the Quran and you'll know that the stoker is Allah. He is the one who stokes hell's fires with the bodies of men so that he can roast other men on a rotisserie, burning off their skin, only to give them a new skin so he can continue the torture forever while boiling water down their throats and making them wear a garment of pitch. Allah is sadistic. He hates humankind. While the stoker, capital S, Allah, increases the heat. They had called Allah's apostle a liar, as would anybody who is sane. 100% of those among Muhammad's kin called him a liar because he was. They claimed that you are nothing but a sorcerer. They claimed a lot more than he was satanic. And Muhammad even admitted that he was satanic. He claimed twice that he was demon-possessed. He claimed that as one of Allah's messengers, he spoke for Satan. All there documented. Why don't you believe him? So Allah destroyed them. Yeah, his retort wasn't to say, no, he's really a prophet because I'm going to issue these prophecies through him. He's going to perform these miracles so that you will know that he really is speaking for God. No, there was none of that. No, we're going to respond to those who are correctly saying that he is plagiarizing all of this. He's stealing it from other sources and then twisting it to fit his agenda, which is the truth. And he's just nothing but a covetous madman, a psychopath. That no, we're going to respond to them by killing them. Not going to debate them, not going to perform a miracle, not going to issue a prophecy, not going to do anything that any sane individual would do, not going to act like Yahweh, who said, okay, you want to speak against Moshe? You want to speak against Dode? Here, I'm going to issue these prophecies that demonstrate that he's telling you the truth, that Allah was a demonic god. So Allah's testimony is a mutilated arm and a slit throat. He is victorious in death. And he validates his religion through unsheathed swords. In Islam, the pious kill and the impious die. Innocent victims fuel the fires of hell. But I have a spoiler alert. Muslims have charted a course and blazed a trail deserving of eternal damnation. And there is where they will meet the stoker, Allah, as hell's warden. As you read on, remember that this is the event that made Islam what it is today. Terrorist raid on Arab merchants at Badr is Allah's and Muhammad's defining moment. It is the centerpiece of the Quran. It's the point where the Quran pivots from a failed religion to a successful terrorist enterprise. I kid you not. It is the fulcrum upon which Islam goes from, at this point, it had 14 years of failing miserably at trying to be a religion. And this very moment, it became a terrorist and criminal enterprise. What's more, the justification for robbing, abducting, and murdering these men was that they properly assessed that Muhammad was demon-possessed and that he was speaking for Satan, both of which Muhammad himself admitted. Therefore, the response of the best Muslims to words they didn't like, even though they knew them to be true, even though Muhammad admitted them to be true, was to hunt them down, mutilate, and then celebrate the deaths of those who spoke the truth to them. They do it today. On this day of doom, Hassan proclaimed, Ishaq, page 348. They retreated in all directions. They rejected the Quran. Well, there was no Quran. Let's be clear. The Quran would not come to exist for 4, 5, 6 generations after Muhammad began reciting surahs. It was all nothing but sound waves. Nothing more than the Quran, to the Quran, than verbal declarations. But they rejected those verbal declarations and they called Muhammad a liar. They did. It's the single most repetitive theme in the Quran. But Allah caused them to make his religion and apostle victorious. Yes, the victory of Islam is the death of those who knew Muhammad best. The victory of Islam is the demise and death of those who knew Muhammad better than anyone today. They lay still in death. Dead men tell no tales. Their throats were severed. Their foreheads embraced the dust. Their nostrils were filled and defiled with filth. Many a noble, generous man we slew this day. We left them as meat for the hyenas, and later they shall burn in the fires of hell. The level of demonic, satanic indoctrination to cause someone to act this way and to speak this way is beyond most people's comprehension, which is maybe why they reject the truth about Islam. They cannot fathom that people can be this evil. But they are. There's a phone call that is presented, has been presented really for a long time, for a year and a half now. I listened to it again on X as it was presented. It is a young man. He's not a member of Hamas or even Islamic Jihad. He's just a Muslim that was out perpetrating 10/7. And he brags to his father that he had killed 10 Jews and that he is now standing above one that was raped and tortured. And he says, I even have some hostages that I'm going to bring back. And his father, oh, that's my boy. Religion hasn't changed one iota. It can't change. This is the Quran, it's the Hadith, it's Muhammad, it's Allah. This is Islam. There's no other Islam. Rejecting the Quran is seen as justification for annihilation, and it is sunnah for genocide. Severing throats was Muhammad's retort rather than delivering a cogent, evidence-based, rational argument against his critics. Because quite frankly, he was incapable of that. And let's remember, the man being denounced was a ruthless megalomaniac and clearly a psychopath. He was a pedophile. He was a rapist. He was a terrorist. He was a mass murderer. He was incestuous. He was a misogynist. He's the man that instigated one of the most disgusting traditions in human history, called the honor killing, where Muslim fathers and mothers, after they've already taken their daughters' genitals and mutilated them, and genital mutilation, mothers hold their daughters down and other Muslims cut away their clitoris, so that there's zero chance that a Muslim woman can ever enjoy sex, because she's not there to enjoy sex. She's there to be conquered and used. And the girl gets a higher bounty for daddy if she can be proven a virgin, so they'll even sew up part of her vagina. And then if she shows any disdain for the religion that mutilated her, for deprived her of all rights, that treats her like a piece of trash, to be owned, a prize to be sold, having no value whatsoever, no rights whatsoever. If she rebels against that in any way, then fathers are honor bound in Islam to kill her. And they do. It's called an honor killing. It's honorable to kill your own daughter in this disgusting religion. And yet you've got progressives out there marching in the streets, wearing kippahs, waving the flag of Islamic terrorists, wanting to annihilate Israel, perpetrate genocide on Jews. Columbia University, on behalf of these psychopaths, these ruthless killers, these men who would not only carve out their daughter's clitoris, but then if she claims, kill her honorably. This is the religion of a ruthless megalomaniac, a complete psychopath, an unrelenting and unremorseful pedophile, a man who was a rapist, a sexist, a liar, a thief, a kidnapper, human trafficker, slave trader, terrorist, mass murderer, knowing and deliberately lying about his wannabe God, who has subsequently plagued the planet with death and misogyny and slavery, terrorism. A religion that killed 1/3 of the planet's population in its first 100 years. And you, as progressives, are so utterly stupid, so grossly immoral, that you will march with them. I've got to tell you, progressives, your deliberate partnership, providing cover and prestige for Islamic terrorism, is one of the most revolting things this planet has ever experienced. You should be shamed, but you've got no conscience. You should know better, but you've been deprived of the ability to think. And Muslims, you have no excuse. I've made this material available to you for 20 years. I did 5,000 radio shows under my own name, 20,000 ultimately hours of radio on this. Every syndicated program in the Western world, certainly of those that speak English. I made Prophet of Doom available free to the world. I've made Goddamn Religion free to the world. I am there on Facebook and X and YouTube doing everything that I can to tell you the truth about your religion. I'm doing what you need to know about this religion. I have shared the truth about your Quran and your Hadith and your prophet and your wannabe God. You have no excuse, and yet you keep on killing. People who do such things ought not have thin skin or expect their victims to toss posies at their feet. A terrorist raid designed exclusively to loot a caravan had become a noble crusade. Men who came to protect their property and family were butchered for calling a demon-possessed sorcerer a liar. One can only lament that this proved untrue. Eshach 3:49. The battle will tell the world about us. Distant men will heed our warning. God damn it, do I wish that were true. And I say God damn it in the purest of ways. It means that God forsakes, he damns, he separates himself from such things. He does. The battle will tell the world about us. I'm trying. I'm doing my best. The currency of Islam would forever be blood and shed for booty and for babes. Blood for booty and babes. Eshach, page 349. The infidels may cut off my leg, and yet I am a Muslim. I will exchange my life for one of the virgins, fashioned like the most beautiful of statues. But alas, he lied. So don't be so foolish as to believe him. Muslim mothers, parents, when one of their sons or daughters is killed, killing Jews, butchering them, terrorizing them, will always say, "Oh, he's right there now with the other martyrs, Shahida, that he's there with the virgins in paradise, having a grand old time." Nah. The possibility, the creator God of the universe, who conceived life, who made things so beautiful, who authored the Torah and prophets that are so remarkably insightful, having created a death cult for men to be ruthless savages, and then rewarding those who are the best killers with perpetual virgins in paradise. Zero. Absolute zero. 2 billion Muslims, you've all been lied to, and you have no excuse, because this is so stupid that to believe it, you have to be a complete ignoramus. And progressives, for you, tolerating it, supporting it, wearing their symbols and their flags, and marching in the streets and on college campuses. What a waste of an education, I should say, indoctrination. A Muslim militant recited these lines. They're recorded by Eshach in the Surat Rasul Allah, now on page 357 of the Oxford University Press, translation by Alfred Goulim. Goulim, probably, is the pronunciation. Their leaders were left prostrate. Their heads were sliced off like melons. Many an adversary I have left on the ground to rise in pain, broken and plucked. When the battle was joined, I dealt them a vicious blow. Their arteries cried out, their blood flowed. That is what I did on the day of Badar. Their leaders were left prostrate, their heads were sliced off like melons. I left them to rise in pain, broken and plucked. That was the vicious blow I wielded upon them. I dealt them. Their arteries cried aloud. Their blood flowed. That's what I did on the day of Badar. Badar is no small issue, by the way, and you can't just relegate Badar to the Hadith because it is celebrated in the Quran. The entire 8th surah is devoted to memorializing this as the birth of the Islamic religion. Well, the birth of Islam as a criminal enterprise and death cult, a terrorist dogma. Islam turned good men bad, and it makes bad men worse. With brains no bigger than or better than melons, and plucked of their humanity, the broken have inflicted incalculable pain. And yet, in all of this time, with rivers of blood, there had not been a drop of ink. Islam's indelible legacy is mass murder, not the Quran. It's hard to even know how to continue after that. When the bloody blades were finally sheathed and the last anguish cry subsided, we read from Ishaq 306 and Tabari, volume 7, page 62. Allah's apostle ordered the dead to be thrown into a pit. All were thrown in except Umayyah. He had swollen up in his coat of mail and filled it. They went to move him, but he fell apart. So they left him where he was and flung some rocks over him. As the dead were being thrown in, Mohammad stood over them and said, "O people of the pit, have you found what your Lord promised you to be true? For I have found what my Lord promised me to be true." Muslims said to him, "O Allah's messenger, are you speaking to dead people who have been putrefied?" He said, "They know what I promised them is true. You hear what I say no better than they. It's just they can't answer me." He was both psychotic and a psychopath. Only the most sadistic of humans gloat over the deaths of those that they have murdered only because they covet what they otherwise do not have. The Quraysh had dignity. They had lives worth living. Muhammad had neither. The Quraysh knew the truth. Muhammad spoke lies. This is almost as sick as the Islamic God gloating over the new arrivals to hell that he was preparing to torture. It is as if Muhammad's warped character rubbed off on his wannabe God. They had become twins. But let's not mince words. Muhammad was completely delusional. He was gloating over the threat which caused his ouster from Petra in Kabaville when he told his kin that he intended to slaughter them. He was now insane, a paranoid, schizophrenic, and psychotic narcissist. It's hard to know, however, if his mental illness made him susceptible to demon possession or if it was exacerbated by it. But either way, I'll leave you to decide whether his promise to slaughter his people and then doing so was a prophecy or a sign of psychopathy. When I searched the etymology of Ume, I discovered that it comes from the Turkish mythology where Ume was the mother goddess of the earth. Her mission was to protect women and children while encouraging fertility. The root of Ume means womb, so while the name was contrived, the inference was that Allah and his Muslims had killed Yahweh and mutilated the rights of women. Bukhari, Volume 5, Book 58, number 193. The Prophet caused those that he had teased him. I'm emotionally distraught over this. This is difficult, even for someone who has spent years in this material, who knows Islam better than anyone alive, who has written the most comprehensive and best documented chronological presentation of the Quran using the Hadith ever compiled. I know this monster better than anyone, and yet, even as I share it with you, it's difficult. I'm still human. It hurts to know something this evil has been allowed to fester, and that in academia and in the media, it's coddled, and that people everywhere make excuses for it. The Prophet cursed those that had teased him. He said, "O Allah, destroy the chiefs of the Quraysh." These now were the custodians of the Kaaba. They were the inventors and the promoters of Islam and every aspect of Islam. Abu Jahl, Utbah, Shaba, Umayyah, and Ubay. I saw these people killed on the day of the Badr battle and thrown into the pit, except Ubay, whose body parts were mutilated. Now, for those who prefer their prophets pathetic, psychotic, possessed, rather than prophetic, Muhammad's your guy. As for me, I prefer them like Moshe and Dawud and Yashaya. But to each his own. While some of this material is redundant, it's important to see how the four prime Islamic sources work together to provide a consistent portrait of this man, of Muhammad, of the dark spirit of Allah, and of this deadly and demonic religion. Every word devastates Muhammad's character, and every stroke reveals his motives and proves that Allah was no more God than a toxic viper. The battles of Badr resurrected the Islam which died around the Kaaba in Petra as a terrorist manifesto. It rose again in Yathrib, and yet the motive was greed. The means to it was terror. The reason was Muhammad. He had come full circle. The abused child was now empowered, demented, and he was a vicious abuser. Bukhari, Volume 5, Book 59, number 314 through 317. At Badr, the prophet, he was not a prophet. He never had a single prophet that he got correct, not a single prophecy. I mean, he was a false prophet, if you want to say that, or a non-prophet. He ordered the corpses of 24 Quraysh leaders to be thrown into a pit. It was a habit of the prophet that whenever he conquered a people, he used to stay at the battlefield for 3 nights So on the third day, he ordered his she-camel saddled, and he set out. His companions followed, saying, "The prophet is proceeding for some great purpose." When he halted at the edge of the pit, he addressed the corpses of the Koresh by their names. "Oh, so-and-so, son of so-and-so, why didn't you obey Allah's apostle? I have found true what my Lord promised me. Have you found true what your Lord promised you?" Umar said, "Apostle, you are speaking to the dead." Muhammad said, "Allah brought them back to life to let them hear me, to reprimand them, to slight them, and so that I might take my revenge over them." Then he quoted the holy Quran verse, "You cannot make the dead listen or the deaf hear your call until they believe our signs and come into submission." Quran 30:52. Muslims believe this is the example that they must follow. Tabari, Volume 7, page 63. The messenger uttered these words, "O people of the pit, you were evil fellow tribesmen to your prophet. You disbelieved me when other people believed me. You drove me out when other people gave me shelter. You fought me when other people came to my aid, you piece of worm rot." Every word of it's a lie. First of all, he was never a prophet. Of course, they, fellow tribesmen, recognized that he was lying. That's the single most repetitive theme in the Quran. 500 iterations of those who knew Muhammad best acknowledging that he was a liar. And he couldn't come up with anything to prove it otherwise, and never even attempted to do so. And they did not drive him out, they laughed him out. I've shared the whole path that caused Muhammad to be completely disgraced, where he had virtually no followers left, and that the religion of Islam was dead. And the terrorist manifesto of Islam was then resurrected in Yathrib. They didn't drive him out of town. They laughed him out of town. And other people that gave him shelter, they were Jews. They were the Jews of Yathrib. And he killed them. He enslaved their children. He raped their women. When other people gave me shelter, bull. Yes, Jews provide houses and loans for you, and you paid them back by cutting off the men's heads, raping their women, and enslaving the children so you could buy more weapons to perpetuate your crime. That's the truth. And this other people came to my aid. It was the Pledge of Aqaba. We pledged to wage war against all mankind, and we will protect you, Muhammad, as we protect our women. It was Muhammad who invoked evil on his fellow tribesmen because they recognized what we know: he was not a prophet. Those who knew this crazed and cruel charlatan best all rejected him. Rather than debate them, Muhammad was bent on slaughtering them, and said so, and then did so. When they eventually fought back, it was too little too late. They left before the job was done. Sadly, it's true that Muhammad finally found men foolish enough to believe him, and they came to his aid by committing to wage war against all mankind, and they are continuing to do so. However, those who offered him shelter did not believe him, and for that he drove them out of their town, stole their homes, and finally opting to murder the last of them. They would be Jews, and he perpetrated genocide against them. This sorry excuse for a human wasn't finished gloating. Ishaq 3:06. The apostles command companions heard him get up in the middle of the night, he went to the pit and said, "O people of the pit," enumerating all who had been thrown into the dirty well, "I have found that my Lord promised me to be true." Normal men would have been repulsed by the sight and smell of rotting corpses, but not this one. He was inspired. So was his spirit, the Lord of the pit. This next vignette is equally disturbing. The foolishness of Islam is now behind us. All that remains is tragic. Tabari 763 and Ishaq 307. Utbah was dragged to the well. Mohammad looked into the face of his son Abu, who was dejected. "I fear perhaps some sadness has entered you on account of your father." "No, by Allah, prophet of Allah," Abu replied, "I had no misgivings about my father, nor about his death. I knew my father to be judicious, to be wise, to be forbearing, cultured, and a virtuous man. I used to hope that these qualities would lead him to Islam. No, these qualities kept him from Islam. They caused his own son to kill him." And those qualities should keep the rest of us from Islam, putting this religion out of its misery. But alas, between progressives, the conspiratorial, and the religious, the judicial thinking, rational judgment is as rare as is sanity in the Quran. The skirmish is over, but it was now time to divvy up the spoils. The next section of Al-Tabari begins under the headline, "The Division of Booty," and I will cover it in our next episode of Muhammad's Criminal Enterprise. And after we have finished with it, we will delve into the 8th surah of the Quran and confirm that all of this is Quranic. It means there's no way away from it. There's no way to deny it. There's no way to pretend that it's anything other than Islam that turns men into ruthless terrorists, mass murderers, rapists, and sadists that mutilate their victims while they celebrate their carnage. I thank you for listening. I know this is tough to hear, but the world needs to hear it. I am Craig Wynn, and this has been an episode of the Iowa Blog.